Russia is planning a new invasion of Ukraine, and Donald Trump appears to have finally grasped that President Vladimir Putin is not ready to sue for peace. Kharkiv again. My name is Jerome Starkey. I'm the defence editor at the Sun newspaper, and this is Frontline, your weekly roundup of the most important news from the war in Ukraine. We're starting with what's happening in Sumy and Russia's neighbouring Kursk Oblast. President Putin visited Kursk Oblast for the first time since Russia claimed to have expelled all of Ukraine's forces after, you remember, in August they launched that lightning offensive. Ukraine disputes that claim, claims it still holds on to a small amount of territory, but by and large it's not disputed that Ukraine's assault into Russia has now finished. Its front line has collapsed and Ukrainian forces have been pushed back into Sumy. Putin visiting that area, he was followed by video cameras that showed him talking to local officials, and those local officials said things like, "I think we need a buffer zone." He said, "How far should that buffer zone be?" "Well, at least to the city of Sumy." That is the capital of the Ukrainian oblast, the Ukrainian province from which its assault into Kursk was launched. We've also seen a significant Russian missile strike onto a Ukrainian training base in Sumy that Russia claims killed 70 soldiers, that Ukraine acknowledged killed 6 and injured 10. In its analysis, the Institute for the Study of War suggesting that Putin's visit to Kursk and perhaps some of these strikes are part of Russian posturing to either threaten or perhaps signal a new offensive. And that may be to force Ukraine to move more forces there, or it may just be to spread or fix Ukrainian positions to leave them weaker elsewhere. It coincides with a phone call that Donald Trump has held with European leaders, where he appears to have acknowledged for the first time that Vladimir Putin is not serious about peace. In that phone call, Trump essentially said Putin doesn't want to negotiate peace because he thinks he's winning. Now that's really important. That's what a lot of European leaders, that's what a lot of people in Ukraine have been telling or trying to tell America for months. The Kremlin is not serious about peace. They're not ready to make concessions, and we've seen that from the Russian negotiating positions. For example, those first face-to-face talks in Istanbul, where the Russians demanded that Ukraine cede even more territory than they've already lost by force. It's significant that Trump has realised that. Trump is mercurial and can say one thing one day and change his mind the next. So it may not signal a real shift in his understanding. And even if it does, the concern in Ukraine and among Ukraine's solid allies is that while America might acknowledge that Russia's not serious about peace, its response may be to step away from the war and fundamentally to stop supporting Ukraine. That doesn't necessarily seem logical, but that is what the White House has signalled in the past. Russia, you're not serious about peace, right? We're going to step away from the war, we're going to stop helping Ukraine, which effectively serves Russia's purposes. And we can see from the commentary inside Russia this week that the Russian nationalist kind of pro-war movement is elated by what they see as this sort of set of events potentially unfolding. And we've also seen Trump in the same breath refusing European and Ukrainian demands to ratchet up pressure on Russia. So whilst, for example, Denmark has announced more military aid and European countries have imposed more sanctions on Russia, Donald Trump's focus appears to be trying to secure future trade deals with Russia. It appears to at this stage have a different focus. In other news, away from the negotiating tables, CNN has obtained some really disturbing audio intercepts which appear to capture the moment that a Russian commander orders his men to execute Ukrainian prisoners of war. And they've linked that audio, intercepted radio communications, to Ukrainian drone footage which captured horrific scenes of 6 Ukrainian soldiers lying on their stomachs in a state of surrender, and subsequently most of them being shot, but one of them is led away. And what we hear in this intercepted radio footage is the commander saying very forcefully and repeatedly, "Take the commander, get rid of the rest." kill the prisoners, essentially, is what he's saying. And he says that repeatedly. There's no doubt about it. While we're on the subject of executions, there's also been a really shocking killing in Spain's capital, Madrid, where Andriy Portnov, who was a former advisor to an exiled pro-Russian Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, Andriy Portnov was shot dead on the school run in Madrid when he just dropped his daughters off at the American school in Madrid. He was shot at least 4 times by a gunman who appears to have escaped on a motorbike. He was shot in the neck, in the chest, and then finally in the head at close range. No one has claimed responsibility for that. The motive, it's not clear yet what Andriy Portnov was doing, what he was involved in Madrid. Of course, it does bring to mind the assassination of Maxim Kuminov, who you may remember was the Russian helicopter pilot who defected to Ukraine with a helicopter. He disappeared after a while and then clearly had taken sanctuary, perhaps been given a new identity, I think, and was living in the south of Spain, and he was killed in February 2024. Now, Kuzminov's death was definitely blamed on Russian security services. It's not clear at the moment who is behind Andriy Portnov's death. But elsewhere in Europe, we are also seeing signs of Russian sabotage and grey zone conflict. In this country, 3 Ukrainian nationals, young men, 2 of them aspiring models, have been charged with conspiring to commit arson after a series of attacks, one against the Prime Minister Keir Starmer's old house where he used to live before he moved into Downing Street, another outside a nearby property in North London, and the third on a car believed to be linked to or previously have been owned by the Prime Minister. Now, I have to be a little bit careful what we say because these are active court proceedings, but at the same time, there have also been arrests in Germany. Germany has arrested 3 men, all of Ukrainian origin, who are accused, I should say, of plotting arson attacks. Now, the plot in Germany appears to echo those attacks earlier this year and last year, where combustible devices were put on board cargo planes, and we saw a number of fires at air freight depots, including in Germany and including in Birmingham in the UK. Essentially what they were doing is putting combustible devices, mechanisms which can spontaneously catch fire. So not bombs that explode, but nonetheless very, very dangerous devices that can ignite fires. And they were put on board freight aircraft. And the suggestion was that these operations by Russian intelligence were designed to target aircraft traveling to North America. All of those 6 people I mentioned are all Ukrainian nationals. In the context of what is happening, it does not appear that this would be a Ukrainian operation. There are active proceedings, but clearly the precedents of the past would suggest that these have the hallmarks of Russian sabotage operations. As ever, if you do have any questions, and you please do ask them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can next time. I'll either get into the comments or I'll answer them on the show. We've got a few to get through this week. The first question is, how does Russia expect Ukraine to give up land? It's a really good question because it sort of gets to the heart of how brazenly outrageous Russia's negotiating positions are. But fundamentally, Russia, I think, expects Ukraine to give up land by force because Russia isn't really expecting to make progress in the peace talks, but it is prepared to continue paying this extraordinary price in terms of lives and in terms of military materiel, which it pays day in, day out in order to inch forward in its sort of scorched earth approach through the ruins of these towns which it is destroying in eastern Ukraine. Question number 2, what about the children? A really good question. What about the children? We talked about the 1,000 for 1,000 prisoner swap. That was the only tangible thing, in the words of President Zelensky, to emerge from the Istanbul peace talks. What about the children? Some 40,000 children believed to have been forcibly abducted from Ukraine by Russia and relocated in Russia, where they are no doubt being brainwashed by the Russian state. They haven't been forgotten. In fact, Ukraine's senators this week passed a motion demanding that the return of those children be a precursor to any peace agreement. So, whilst Russia has said we want more land before we'll even agree a ceasefire, Ukraine is saying, I think quite justifiably and understandably, we want our children back before we agree to a peace deal. Final question is slightly theoretical, but a really good question is, could Russia be expelled from the United Nations? And if so, why hasn't it been already? It's a really good question. I had to look it up. It's a bit technical. Countries can be expelled from the United Nations General Assembly by a vote, and that would be if they repeatedly violated the principles, persistent violations of the United Nations founding charter. But in order for that vote to take place, it has to be recommended under Article 6 of the UN's Constitution, has to be recommended by the Security Council. Now, Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council with a power of veto. So clearly, Russia is never going to put forward a motion for its own expulsion. Thank you very much for watching. If you've got any questions, please do ask them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can next week. In a Ukrainian armoured vehicle, and we're heading towards the Russian border.